Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. Bird is a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. Well, a bird is a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. Well, a bird is a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. Well, a bird is a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird. The bird's a bird. Oh, well, oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. The bird's a word. Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird.
Hi everybody, welcome to our premiere episode of The Word. This will be a show where we'll be speaking about hot topics and issues regarding speciesism, anti-speciesist advocacy, and just the movement in general. Some topics may be controversial, some will be very interesting, but this is going to be an unscripted, free-thinking show.
Right. And it's going to be off the cuff. It's going to be as free thinking as possible. And we're going to bring a whole bunch of awesome people in on the panels once in a while. Starting with this awesome panel here. On the left of the screen, we have...
Megan.
Introduce yourself. All right.
I'm Adam from At War for Animals Niagara.
I'm Jason.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Mary Chris from Toronto.
Right, so this is the panel we have put together. We hope to have everybody back for as many shows as possible, as many shows as we can get them in on. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to have a hat full of topics that are very topical. Sometimes it's going to be things that we feel are important for the movement to discuss. Sometimes it'll just be some fun stuff to talk about, but ultimately it's going to be engaging, it's going to be fun, and topical.
And random.
And random.
And random.
Very random.
So, for our first topic of our first show.
So we got the hat here. And we've got... What is speciesism?
What a great topic.
Who
good
wants
place to start.
Who wants to start on that one? What is speciesism?
So, from my understanding, speciesism is the systemic oppression of non-human people by humans. And I think it's really important that we include that it is by humans.
Right.
Because a lot of people tend to think of speciesism as something that would include humans, that you could be speciesist to humans, but you really can't because they're the oppressors.
Right, and I mean, you can't... No one hates humans. You can't hate your own species based on species membership.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. It's not like racism or sexism where you're judging someone else based on a difference. You're the same, like we're all the same species. So you cannot hate another member of your species based on species membership.
Right.
And I think speciesism is something that most of us anyway have grown up with. That we have all played a part in being speciesist at some point, and I think it's really important that we recognize that unwittingly we have been a part of it since the beginning.
Most definitely.
Coming back to Adam's point, I think that you can be speciesist towards your own species. I mean, I know a lot of people who hate people because they are people.
Our people.
I guess because we have the capabilities that we do to destroy so much and cause so much suffering because we are human, because we have the advantages that we do have. So you can, just that
Okay.
we are more savage towards those who are not of our species.
How does supremacy play into that, though? Because another aspect of speciesism is that the species that is the oppressive species sees themselves as superior to the other species that they're oppressing. So how would that work if you were being speciesist to another human?
I guess it's not really like a humans hating humans or a person hating humanity wouldn't really be a supremacy thing. Like, it's not that humans think they're better than humans, because that's not a logical train of thought. I think it's just discrimination based on the species. I understand supremacy takes a part in speciesism towards other species, obviously, and that's the more important topic. But no, yeah, I do think that you can hate humans for being human, and based on that trait alone, I guess it's multiple traits that make us human.
Right. One of the things that when I'm doing activism, people who don't have a very well informed concept of what speciesism is they will turn it on us and say, you're being speciesist to us by hating on us because we are exploiting animals. They like to wrap up humans as victims of speciesism in that manner. And I just don't think that's very appropriate.
We're definitely not victims. No one's being victimized. No human person's being victimized by speciesism.
Right.
It's just a general feelings.
Right.
So the consensus then probably would be that we should not consider humans to be covered under species-based discrimination.
Right.
Right.
There's a lot of like other
Yeah.
human-specific issues.
Right.
This is the only kind of one that is dealing specifically with the species-based discrimination faced by non-human people.
Right.
So I think we should probably keep this movement focused on that, because I mean that's really all that they have.
Right.
That's right. And especially because when we're speaking of speciesism, we're talking about rules and laws and all kinds of things that have been applied towards animals because of their species, which isn't necessarily falling into the idea of just hating other humans for being humans.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so many other things like classism, xenophobia, racism. There's all kinds of ways that humans are oppressive or hateful towards one another. I mean, but we've only got one that classifies as, this idea of human supremacy and human privilege over non-humans.
Right.
So I think we need to keep it as crystal clear and black and white as possible.
Right, and I think another big important part of that is the fact that other animals besides humans, non-human people, hold the legal status of property. So
Right.
every human, no matter how disadvantaged you may be, enjoys privileges that non-human people can't even imagine, because non-human people are literally objects. Like, a non-human person has the same rights and protections as this hat, right? If I'm going to destroy this hat right now, nobody is going to, I'm not going to suffer any meaningful punishment for destroying this hat.
No.
Right? And that is, I think, the biggest part of speciesism where we need to be focusing on is their legal status as property, because it's very obvious that they're not objects. These are individuals, and they should be respected and treated as such.
And that's shown through the way various species are labeled, right? Cows and chickens are labeled as food. Even these guys here in our society are labeled as pets. Certain animals are labeled as pests. And based on those labels, we get to do whatever we want with those animals. And, where did those labels come from? Those animals weren't born with them. We've given them those labels. I didn't give them these labels, you didn't, but we've all grown up hearing these labels and just never questioning them. And because of those labels that they have no say in, it is determined what we are allowed to do with those animals.
But Mary Chris, that's their purpose.
Of course.
That's their purpose, Mary Chris.
You are right
What else
there.
are they good for if they aren't serving their
True.
purpose?
I think of a rat, universally most people probably think a rat is just a pest. And I think of that little rat on the day he was born, and imagine waking up and going, oh darn, I'm a pest. I didn't want to be born a pest. It's just ridiculous. And if you explain that to children, like I do in my teaching, they get it right away. It's like, oh yeah, never thought of that before.
And the strange thing regarding like pest animals, A lot of them are considered that because they carry disease or something, but humans spread so much disease to each other, and a lot of that disease stems from the fact that we are raising animals for food.
Exactly.
So we're creating our own problem, and then we're the pests, but we don't consider ourselves to be that because we're not of a different species,
Right.
because we're humans.
That's a human privilege,
Exactly.
which
Yeah.
comes out of speciesism.
Yeah, we make the rules. The
Yeah.
animals are given no say.
For me, I have definitely, over the last couple of years, come to see speciesism as the root of the issue. And when I first became an activist, I never once used that word, anti-speciesism. None of that was in my, realm of thought at all. But thanks to Adam and Jason here, I've really learned a lot, and learning that speciesism is the social justice issue that we are trying to dismantle and challenge in society. That has definitely helped me evolve as an activist. And when I am speaking with people about the issues, it always has to come back to speciesism as being the reason why these non-human individuals are being exploited and have property status and have absolutely zero rights whatsoever.
And I agree with Nicole. When I first started doing activism, I had never even heard the word speciesism, but just let everyone know this is not like a made-up word by At War for Animals. Adam, you probably know more about the start of the word, its beginnings.
It was coined in the 1970s, like long before I was born. So I mean, the idea has been around for quite some time.
By a sociologist.
Yeah, by an actual studied professional. So I mean, this really is a form of irrational discrimination. You know, just like racism, sexism, any of these other things, oppressions that are based on just irrelevant and not unimportant biological differences, right? Just because we're slightly different biologically, that somehow changes our worth, and I have a big problem with that, right? Just because someone is biologically has the skin a different color than me, I don't think it's right or just to view them as less than anyone else. There's no difference, or just because your gender is different or your sex is different or any difference about you, you have like a cognitive difference, any of these things, they don't make you, they don't stratificate your value.
Well, one of the main issues is where do we make that where do we put that threshold as to who gets moral consideration? Like, do plants get moral consideration? Because there's a lot of humans out there that think plants have feelings, right? So who is incorporated in this idea that personhood starts at this spot? What threshold is that?
To me, it seems to be someone who has their own interests. It's quite clear when you get to know an animal, spend any time, that they clearly have their own interests that are important to them and they need to be honored. It's a difficult one when you think of plants. I'm sure they have their own interests in some way or another. So it's a tricky one even for me to explain to other people when they come up and they ask about what about the plants, don't they have feelings and this and that. And at this point, to me, that's something that hasn't been proven to me conclusively. So I may have to worry about that someday, but at this point, I'm not 100% sure. Do anyone else have a good argument for that?
I think sentience should be the level at which somebody is a somebody as opposed to a something.
Right.
Plants are living, and they are living, but they don't have sentience. If you look at the main difference between plants and animals, which are sentient beings, the one thing that we evolved differently for is plants are rooted. They're stationary. It would be like the most hugest evolutionary fail if plants felt pain but couldn't run away.
Right.
And
Right?
even things like bivalves, like clams and stuff like that, they can still escape danger. They are still evolved to have that response to danger. So when people bring up plants, their secondary statement sometimes follows as bivalves. Like, well, what about oysters? What about clams? They don't seem to have any brain or anything. And while that's true, like biologically they don't, they've still evolved to escape danger and try to avoid pain.
Yeah.
So.
So
That's a good point.
I would say that they would fall into that category of persons we should not be consuming.
Definitely.
Yeah. Or exploiting for any reason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's also the necessity aspect of it. It's not like, I think the movement gets hung up on suffering, right? On we should be preventing suffering. But ultimately, I think the main question that we should ask each other is it necessary for me to
Right.
use this individual?
Yeah.
Right? If it's not, like, we just shouldn't. Right?
Yeah.
And then you can consider suffering, but the first question should always be, is it necessary?
Right.
Can I find a way around depriving this individual of future experiences? Right?
I remember a waiter at a restaurant asking me one time, he said, well, what about fish? And I was about to explain whatever I could explain about it, but I stopped myself and I just looked at him and I said, they just want to swim. And his eyes just opened. He was like, you know, and that's all it took. You know, yeah, that fish has other plans.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. He's got in his little fish brain.
Yeah.
He's got his whole fish world going on.
He's got his day
Yeah.
planned. It's
He's got his or her dealings for the day set out. Just like all these other, like mice, all these animals, they're all individuals with desires and dreams and social networks and languages just like us. And I mean, just because we can't understand them, just because we don't communicate in the same manner, doesn't mean that they don't have similar or different capabilities than us, right? Like just because we don't necessarily understand dog language the way they speak to each other, doesn't mean that dog language is any less valuable than human language, right?
yeah.
Because a lot of people often say to justify their species-based discrimination that, oh, you know, dogs can't paint paintings or make symphonies, or you know, birds can't do this, right? But I always question them, like, can you build anything with your face?
Right.
Because
We can't fly.
Yeah.
right, and I mean, if you specifically bird nests, if you look at a bird nest is a very resilient structure. They can deal with all kinds of weather. They're very intricately woven together with different materials that are just scavenged, and it's a very well-built structure. And they do this entirely with just the use of their face. I always challenge anyone, build me anything with just your face. Okay?
I'd like to see that.
I would too.
But and that's really true, and that's the problem, is that people try to compare human intelligence and human skills with animal behavior. And it's just not fair. And I'll say to people sometimes, well, a chicken doesn't need the intelligence of a human being to live their lives successfully, just as I don't need to be able to build something with my face in order to be a human. And so you just can't compare. We are all given the tools or the intelligence that we need in order to be who we are.
There's a
no
quote,
need to compare.
It's something like, you can't judge a fish's intelligence by how it climbs a tree.
Right,
Right.
right, exactly.
We all have different sets of intelligence, like sets of skills that we're intelligent at.
Right.
Like, for instance, I know I couldn't go live in the wild, but animals are just, like non-human animals are doing that
Right.
all the time. Like, I would die if I tried to do that because I don't have the skills to accomplish that.
Yeah.
Good point.
We tend to, humans tend to be very human-centric around their understanding of what means intelligence. In the World Peace Diet, Dr. Will Tuttle uses a whole chapter of that book just talking about intelligence and what it is. And ultimately, he's whittled it down to simply meaning the ability to make connections. That's it. Your ability to make connections between your environment and how you're going to navigate through that environment. Right? So in a human environment, we need to have human skills and human intelligence to navigate through the human world.
Right.
A squirrel simply has their own set of needs to make connections to find sources to meet their needs, right? So ultimately, he whittles it down to that very simple, non-complex form of the ability to make connections.
I love
If
that.
you cannot make connections, you won't be able to survive, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, very simple.
In terms of speciesism, I think that a lot of people within the community are skeptical of starting to use different language and incorporate that into their dialogue because they think it's too much for people to comprehend. And there's already so much, and from my perspective, it just seems so logical and straightforward. If you understand the injustice and social justice issue that is racism, sexism, how difficult could it really be? And a lot of people that I've encountered while participating in the horse carriage campaign get it like that. There's no argument, there's no back and forth, there's no questions. Like, you avoid a ton of that wasted time when you go right to that issue. So what would anyone's suggestions and thoughts be for those who say it's just too much for people, we need to
Actually,
dumb it down?
I have something for that. One activist I saw recently was saying we should avoid using the word vegan so much, which I agree with. I think speciesism is a far better term because no one really knows, like, they understand it when they hear it. They understand it's got an ism at the end. It has species at the beginning. They can put two and two together, but when people hear veganism, they're already turned off by that. They don't want to hear it anymore. They just shut down, they'll ignore you, or they'll just start trying to think of their comebacks to whatever you're going to say. When they hear speciesism, it's not a word that they're used to, so they're more intrigued by it.
Exactly.
They'll actually listen because it's a new topic to them. Whereas vegan has been thrown around, no one even knows what it means anymore. It's been so watered down by the media and influencers. So I think it's a really beneficial thing to get speciesism as the front face for campaigns trying to promote the end of animal use.
And I'll add to that, the problem I think now with veganism is it's associated with people.
Yep.
And
And the
people,
diet.
people hate those vegans. So now they're not even thinking about animals. They're so busy with another battle against another group of human beings. Whereas speciesism always brings it back to the animals.
Yeah.
Even when people are promoting veganism for health or for the environment or for anything else, there are a million little reasons in there that people can dismiss them. But if you keep bringing it back to the animals, they have to focus on how they feel about that issue.
Yeah.
And that's where I think speciesism is a really, really important.
Yeah, and a
That's a
lot,
really
a
good
lot
point.
of that problem of the dilution of veganism, I think, stems from the fact that people suggest that you can go vegan for any other reason than for the animals, because that was the original intention.
Right.
You can go plant-based for the environment, you can go plant-based for your health, but when sticking with the original meaning of veganism, you can only go vegan for the animals, which has been lost.
Right.
And there's probably no way we're going to get that back.
And also, people do associate veganism with people, like you said, Mary Chris, but at the same time, they associate it with something they have to do,
Yes.
rather than looking at it as something they're doing to end something or for someone else. Like, it's always, like, I am going vegan. It's not like I'm anti-speciesist, where speciesist is at the end of that,
Right,
where
right.
you're talking about the other species. It covers that. When you're going vegan, you just think, like, I have to do this and this and this, and these are things I have to do. But when you're talking about speciesism, there's always the non-human animal at the end of that you're thinking about. You're thinking, I'm not doing this because of this.
Right, and that's a really good point. It's all the things I have to do. It's like, no, it's what you're doing for someone
Someone else.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Is he like dog snoring?
Yeah.
No, he's having a dream.
He's having a dream, yeah.
That's really cute.
Yeah,
See,
he's
he
barking
is,
in his dream.
he is a fully sentient individual.
Yeah. It's for
Absolutely.
sure.
Dreams and all.
Yeah.
Well, with that, should
yeah,
we give
so-
our final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Feel free.
All right.
Fire
so
away.
I guess to end it off, speciesism, what is it? It's any form of discrimination or really any use that you feel you can get out of a non-human animal for your benefit, for your gain, or just generally, if you're using an animal, you're speciesist. That's what I'm wrapping up with.
All right, and I would probably like to wrap up by saying what makes anti-speciesism so much more powerful to me than your typical vegan argument would be that generally when you present someone with your typical go vegan argument, this is what you get. Right? Everybody's had that. Go vegan, oh fuck you, right? Because you're telling somebody what to do. And that's what people hate the most is you coming and being like, oh, you shouldn't eat meat, right? People have this immediate angry reaction to you telling them what to do, whereas when you advocate with the anti-speciesist message, you are not telling them what to do, you are getting them to have critical thought about an issue and come to a conclusion on their own. Right? So that's why when we advocate, we don't even talk. We don't even talk about food, right? Because food is not the issue. It's the objectification of others that's the issue, right? And that's what I would like to say. Just for people who might be afraid to try it, it's way easier. It's way more clear, and you're gonna have way less people telling you to fuck off.
Good point.
Yeah, so with regards to speciesism, I like to tell people right off the hop, I ask them, do you know what speciesism is? And if they'd say, most people are going to say no. First time hearing it, I always say it's like racism and sexism. And they go, oh, okay. And then I elaborate, right? I go from there. So the great thing about doing anti-speciesism activism is the fact that you can tie it into a social justice movement that they already have the format for. They have the format for understanding what you're talking about. And the other excellent thing about fighting speciesism as a social justice movement is it actually compels people to act. Right? Veganism, we ask people to go vegan. It's like, please be vegan, choose vegan, right? We're asking people to, and most of the time people just think it's about, getting them to change their diet. I also hear a lot of people saying it's a lifestyle. Well, anti-speciesism is about justice. It's something that's compelled upon people. It's something that we expect of people, where veganism is more presented like a choice. Please do it, right? There's no compulsion to it. But when you frame it, the messaging as an anti-speciesist message, then you're presenting people that there's a matter of justice involved in it, and you're obligated to be as just as you possibly can, and I think it resonates with a lot more people that way. And it also removes this idea that you're trying to shove, a certain type of food down their throat, right? Which is not what we want people to think. We want to change people's holistic view and the way they think about our non-human cousins. Right? We want them to be seen as individuals, as people, rather than things. And I don't think veganism, if you even think about veganism, they're always talking about animal products. They continue to associate animals as products.
Right.
And that's very problematic. But in an anti-speciesist platform, we don't refer to them as products at all. We, as people may have already heard us using in this episode, that we refer to them as people, as which you should if you reject their property status.
My final thoughts on speciesism is that I do hope that anyone watching does seriously consider using this language in their activism and incorporating anti-speciesist dialogue into their conversations with people. I think that, as we've discussed here, it is the reason why we are all here today, and the reason why we're fighting for non-human people is because of their property status, and because they are considered nothing more than a piece of garbage. So we have to challenge that way of thinking. We have to challenge human supremacy, and we have to challenge that we have come to see them and use them in very violent and unjust ways. And obviously, you know, focusing on the fact that when there is no necessity to exploit someone else, then there's absolutely no need to do it.
Right. And my final thoughts on it are, I find it's a really useful word for a lot of the reasons you said. Is it asks people to think for a second about something new. So right away you have a door that's open to you to talk about. It also, it's an area where people can't say, oh, I don't give a shit about animals, you know, whatever, because it's not about giving a shit about animals, it's about justice. And when you tie it into other human rights issues, for example, you can relay the fact that it's quite likely there are people of other races or other religions who you don't like, but you still understand that they deserve justice. And I think that's a really important fact, that you don't have to like animals to know that they deserve justice. So I really, it's something that I'm trying to use all along and trying to teach young people. And people are smart. I think the people that they worry about, oh, no, it's too confusing an issue to bring up. They understand cruelty, they understand suffering better. You can still talk about those issues in the conversation, but I think people get speciesism a lot quicker than they get the million different types of suffering and cruelty that animals endure.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, everyone, on our premiere episode of The Word. You can join us every week for this program, and we will be drawing all kinds of other topics out of the magic hat, and we'll be discussing them in a free and unscripted manner. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. The bird's a winner. Well, a bird, bird, bird. Bird is a winner.